favorite, and it's been my favorite for over 25 years, is eBay. And that's how long I've been part of eBay. But it's grown with me, and I feel like it's grown to know me in a lot of time. So while a lot has not necessarily changed with the brand, I think a lot of the fundamentals and the ethos of it is still there. They've refined their mobile app in a way that it is so elegant, it is so easy to use, and it is so personalized in terms of what I like to shop for, what I like to buy, what I like to collect. So I love eBay just in terms of their point of view, but also how they keep me coming back year after year, month after month, day after day. They're doing something right, because going back to what we were saying earlier, they were putting the message in the right place at the right time, showing me what I want to see. So I'm a big fan of eBay. Of course, I'm a big fan of Tesla as you think about aesthetics and disruption in the market and user experience. Tesla has done it very, very well. And I'll go back 10 years when Tesla was just getting off the ground. I was with a different company at the time, and we went to go do a deep dive or brand study of Tesla. And we went to a gallery up in northern New Jersey that had just opened. They don't call it a dealership, they call it a gallery. And walking into the gallery, there was a chassis on the floor and several computers. It looked more like an Apple store. There was no car on the floor. Right. So you walk in, and there's a woman standing there, and we start digging into her role, her responsibility, but also how she was attached to the mission of Tesla as well, too. And really digging, you could see that she was bought in. She's like, look, if you don't want to go to Mars, you shouldn't be working here. Right. And so I found that fascinating in terms of, hey, they're so deeply embedded in the values of what the company is about. That's going to translate into this kind of missionary and mercenary employee that believes in the mission of what we're trying to drive, but also in terms of rolling up their sleeves and getting things done. So it really kind of flipped aesthetics. It flipped the experience. It flipped the shopping experience on its head. And if anybody drives a Tesla, if the process is still the same, when you buy your Tesla, it goes into this room and you get a minute to kind of walk around the car and spend some time with the car and get to know it and address the car. All right. So there's this kind of emotional connection. I'm not sure if they're still doing that or not, but that was part of the tour that we got when we saw the gallery. So as you think about Tesla, between the aesthetics, the simplicity, and how minimal it is, but how beautiful they are as well, I'm a big fan of what that looks like, because it blends, again, that digital and physical into a phygital,
and one thing
which is
that
pretty
they
cool.
nailed on the user experience in the Frictionless is the charging stations, is the Tesla superchargers. As a new EV owner, I've had mine a month and a half, and I just took a trip to LA. We were 10 hours coming back because I had a 4-hour, and I don't have a Tesla. I have a non-Tesla, so I can't use the Tesla superchargers. I had a 4-hour delay in Palm Springs trying to get charged up so I could make it back here. So it was enough to say, I'm not sure I'd take another trip in my EV. Tesla owners don't have that issue. They have really perfected that frictionless experience, so you don't get the range anxiety. So perfect example.
That's exactly what Elon Musk said leading into it. He said the secret of Tesla has nothing to do with the vehicle. It has everything to do with the charging network. And if you look at his strategy, and I remember looking at it 7 years ago, when the Model 3 was just announced, or however long ago that was at this stage. But he had everything running north-south and east-west, and 2 running east-west, one on the north side and one on the south side, so that you could navigate the entire United States. And that was a very open, design-led thought to make sure that Tesla as a brand could ultimately dominate the EV world. And you're an audience of anecdotal one, experience, yes, of how that's succeeded.
I find a way to work my book into every conversation. The funny thing is, while I was standing there in Palm Springs in 100-degree weather, waiting to get my car charged and chatting up all the other EV owners that were going through the same nightmare, I texted my nephew, who's been looking at EVs, and I said, buy the Tesla. The non-Tesla has not figured this out yet.
There's an interesting was on the news a couple of years ago. So the number one state to have EVs is California. The second one is Florida. And a hurricane was coming through over Florida. So when you think about evacuations and people driving, there's not a whole lot of charging stations down in that area. So what happens? What happens to these people that have EVs? They're trying to get out of state and get out of harm's way. Where do they charge? if they have a Tesla. And it was an interesting problem. It's like, man, somebody needs to figure that out. If Florida is the second
and
largest state with EVs,
you got
that's
you
the
got
problem to be
earthquakes
solved.
in California, so
That's
you know, all
fascinating.
kinds of natural disasters. But what I do love about this example, when we think back to digital experiences, the actual digital experience, and I've driven a Tesla, you know, is pretty great, right? They've done a lot of things well with digital. What we just talked about had nothing to do with the digital experience. It's all about the joy of ownership and making it possible to take a car on a long trip. Because when you buy a car, you expect to be able to drive it on a long trip. And you buy an EV, you're going, I don't want to buy gas, where it's $7, you know, in California. I mean, so I think it's a beautiful example of that phygital, where it's the end-to-end experience and the full customer experience if you want to build that trust and loyalty.
Yeah, you just took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say the same thing, that they developed this loyalty, trust, and expectation, right? With reliability as well, that I am going to make it to my destination, or I'm going to find a charging station, or my car is not going to break down, or whatever it is. So again, I don't know what that looks like in terms of overall repair costs, but you have to imagine there is a deep
Indeed.
loyalty when it comes
So
to
what are
Tesla
the keys
ownership.
to delivering on great aesthetics and digital experiences? Like if somebody's listening to this and they're going, oh, wow, we need to bring this kind of thinking to our company, how would you approach it from a process standpoint? How do you change that culture and start to think in this aesthetic-led, design-led thinking?
Yeah, it's really about presenting the outcome and not the idea, right? Because, like I was saying earlier, you can take your beautiful designs upstairs, but if it's not attached to any sort of business value, investment, strategy, nobody's going to care, right? We got to be able to show, what is this actually providing. So sure, you want to make sure your team is empowered, they have creativity, they're working on new innovative ideas. They want to feel like they're not the team that's known for t-shirts and logos, but they're creating business value for the company. That's great. They should be challenged, they should have career ladders, they should have goals, they have specific insight that's given during design reviews that's more about the research and less about why was it designed this way. It's really thinking through, how do you empower that team, and it should come from the top in terms of leadership, and what does that look like. But really, to have success and grow design and get the trust and the belief that aesthetics can affect it, is really, how do you map it to some sort of KPI or measurements. And I think that's where some of these innovation hubs fail as well too, is that it's done in a vacuum, right? So we hear about the innovation hubs or accelerators, and they usually die out pretty quickly because it's done in a vacuum. It's not mapped to any sort of strategy. It's not mapped to any sort of investment. But if I can tie my design work to some sort of investment or capital budget or whatever it is, I can actually prove out, I'm going to get more buy-in, and I'm going to get the trust from our leaders as well too, because I'm speaking the business of language. That would be my advice to any design team that's really trying to get the belief and trying to scale and trying to grow. I can't tell you how many companies I've talked to that have this same problem as well, where the design maturity is really low, right? And that it's really more about, hey, make this pretty, versus, oh, we can actually create value for the organization.
In this whole conversation, the big thing that's kind of overwhelming me at the moment is to say we probably need to elevate our friction forces to just don't call it aesthetics and call it design. That seems to be a more applicable way to think about it, because this conversation is just, it's well beyond what I anticipated.
No, I appreciate that. And look, you have to invest in your people, first of all, and make sure that you build the trust with your people and your design team. Having design principles and everything that you can rally around in terms of the things that you believe in and stand on, believing in the core values of the organization, going back to what I was saying earlier about missionary and mercenary. But you also can prove out the business value of design and user experience in investing. So we saw a huge spike in terms of UX investment during the pandemic, which was great. And it was gravy train for if you were a UX designer. Now in the last year, we've seen the market go sideways and everybody's getting laid off. So whether you're in UX, product engineering, recruiting, it's a hard market out there. But companies really have to get on board and understanding that UX can improve performance, reduce errors, increase ease of use, attract more users, increase adoption rates, elevate the brand. So these are all qualitative things that you can bring to your leadership. This is why we should be doing. So you have to tell that story up. You have to convince leadership that there's value in this, and that's
Use
where
a
you're going to
great term.
get
You
that
said the language
ROI.
of
That's where you're going to
business,
get that
right?
trust.
It's you've got to convert it from a design and creative to the language of business that the CEO will get.
Yep, exactly. He doesn't care about the pixel perfect mock-up. He cares
And yet
about
the
what are you
irony
driving
is
for my business and how are you
design is
solving
such a
these
personal
problems.
thing. And it's having led marketing in a lot of companies. I always joke, the CEO never tries to be the lawyer if he's not never tries to do the legal team's job, but they always think they know design, right? Because design is such a personal thing. And I love what you're talking about, of bringing it back to metrics and bringing it back to outcomes, business outcomes, changes that whole conversation. It almost doesn't matter how good it looks at that point. It's how good of experience the customer has with it.
Agreed. And if you include your leaders early on in the process and get buy-in, you're going to have a much better time selling it through. So you should be talking to them at the research level. So if they're hearing about the research and the pain points, and what I always like to say is, show me the pain, right? And if we can show, who doesn't want to know about their customers and where the friction is? So if you can bring that to leaders and show the pain and get the buy-in early and feel like they're part of the process included, that's where you're going to get additional buy-in as well too. So going back to what we were saying earlier, having your team empowered to do so is going to feel like they've got skin in the game, right? And they feel like they're working towards something bigger and they're part of the mission, which allows them to do great work as well. So you have to celebrate those heroes and people that will really drive those through. And if you can find that executive evangelist within your organization, or what we call the godfather or the godmother, this is something we talk about in my Punks and Pinstripes network group, is that if you've got the godfather or godmother within your organization that's going to part the sea so you can drive a Mack truck through in terms of innovation or new ideas or outcomes, that's the person you want on your team that's also willing to take a bullet for you as well too. Right, so that's your bulletproof vest. And we had that at Home Depot through my boss, Prat Vamana, who's now the chief digital officer over Target. He was our godfather and he drove innovation like a Mack truck through Home Depot. And you got that person, that's terrific, because that's going to help with innovation and getting the buy-in, because they're willing to take a risk and they're not going to say no to an idea.